So the match-ups happened. They happened. Let's talk about them. What happened yesterday in the NBA? Now, what I really want to speak on is this Bucks and Pacers game. I did not really like, you know, the way that this game was played on the Bucks side. Chris Middleton played great. Dame played great, but I believe that the biggest problem with the Bucks is that they don't abuse how good their team is. Most of their offense is ran through Dame ISOs, catch and shoot threes and this type of isolation ball, which is something very common of Doc Rivers, right? And Doc Rivers normally does that because of the fact that he has big issues with coaching. He's a player coach, and he'll normally have problems with um, getting himself and his team good points, good rebounds, good assists, and getting everything to work well. But honestly, in this game, what we could see was the fact that this isolation ball is as much as it works sometimes, as we saw Chris Middleton drop 42, we saw him have his comeback playoff game, as we know that Chris Middleton is a clutch player in the playoffs, and especially being away from home as they were playing in Indiana, him and Dame actually went crazy. But the problem was that in the fourth quarter, the Pacers were running these really complex pick and rolls, these defensive sets, which even though they were not working to the fullest, they were shutting down some of the Bucks' best stars. But the problem was with the defense in Milwaukee is that they were playing like this weird zone where whenever Haliburton would do something, they would always find the switch to Bobby Portis. Always. Bobby Portis, not Bobby Portis, I'm sorry, Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez would always be switching onto Tyrese Haliburton. And it took the miracle shot from Middleton, right, to send the game to overtime. And the coach still couldn't fix these problems. The biggest issue with this game was the fact that we saw a variety of different people and a variety of different players play this type of defense in Milwaukee where they would just run two on the ball. And I didn't like that at all, as I think running two on the ball on a Pacers squad, which is literally equipped to fight against double teams, is something that is pretty crazy. Then Dame had to hit that miracle three, but then they allowed Tyrese to just float through the lane. They fouled him, and then he hit that floater. When, in my opinion, if you were gonna foul him, just foul him hard enough to stop the shot. You don't have to allow him to make that. You could have just fouled him into the ground, and even if that would have been some type of flagrant or something, then I think it would have been better because he gets two free throws, and if he breaks one, then or makes both even, you get the chance to tie it up, go into double OT. But I believe that this game was probably one of the worst Bucks performances that we've seen. As even though Middleton played great, Damian Lillard played great, Brook Lopez played great, and Bobby Portis played great, the biggest problem was the fact that none of these guys could really do it on defense as much as they were doing it on offense. And that's really, the synthesis that I kind of got from that game. When it came to the Mavericks and Clippers game, this was a very disappointing game as James Harden has been the best player for the Clippers, which is something crazy to say as he really hasn't had a down game yet. And especially when they won, he was probably the biggest reason as to why. I believe the fact that this game played out the way that it did, with Luka not scoring that much and Kyrie and stuff. Like the Mavericks scored 101 points to win this game. But I think that the biggest problem with this game was the fact that the Clippers stars could not score very well, and they still managed to put up 90 points. The Clippers were honestly playing great, but their stars combined for I think it was about maybe 11 points. Paul George, no, for 16 points they combined, and 7 assists and 14 rebounds, which that's not a bad stat line if you're talking about one player, but when you're talking about the two best players on your team, that's not a great stat. I think that Ty Lue's coaching and the switch of putting Paul George on Luka is a great thing. He obviously seems fit to do it, and in most times, Paul George can actually obstruct what Luka is doing. But I feel like the biggest problem with this game was just letting Dallas play their big man game. For the other two games, it was a big proponent for Ty Lue to stop the big men from Dallas because he knows that Luka is great, but Luka cannot win you a game by himself. So if you go and you take Luka and you shut away his big men, which are his main option to pass it to, then he will most likely, not be as effective and the team won't score as many points. But the paint looked open in this game. A lot of the times it was Russell Westbrook and James Harden in the paint. Terrible. And they were running this super small ball with Ivica Zubac. And it was just terrible. Like, in my opinion, what the Clippers need to do is play depending on what roster the Mavericks put out there. If the Mavericks go and put two big men out there, then put two big men who can defend that. Let's say if they put P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, then you put Ivica Zubac, Kawhi Leonard, but don't run this full guard lineup, as I think that Ty Lue, even though he's a great coach and he's playing great, and he's been coaching great, I do think that now you're in a deficit because Dallas is able to abuse all of your matchups. I do want to say shout out to Luka. He almost got a triple-double. He was one assist away. And I do want to say shout out to James Harden and Norman Powell and to the Clippers because they managed to score 90 points and make the game competitive even without them having their three of their top 5 players, play to the best of their ability. For the Suns, it was the complete opposite, than for the Clippers. Their stars played great, but everyone else on their team just sucked. And I think it's a big proponent of the Suns system that they don't get any type of love when it comes to their coaching. I feel like bringing in Frank Vogel was a great idea, and that Rudy Gobert travel was absolutely disgusting, by the way. But I feel like bringing in Frank Vogel was a great idea. I feel like he's a great coach. But the problem is that in the Timberwolves roster, you've had way too many players who can counter the Suns, and they're way too ready to just, beat the Suns. Now the Suns are down 3-0, and the biggest problem is that in the playoffs, from comparing last season to this season, the Suns don't look the same because and this has been the problem with them all season, their roster looks confused. They don't know if to let the stars shine and let them do everything. Because since it's 3 of them, you have to give the ball to all of them. They don't know if to, evenly distribute the whole thing. And I feel like the problem is that D-Book needs to turn back into that playmaking shooting guard that he was being at the start of the season. I get that in the playoffs you want more scoring from your guys, but that's not been working. This game, everyone scored, and you guys still weren't able to win. So for the Suns, I feel like their biggest thing should be get Devin Booker as the playmaker, make him assist a lot, as he got 8 assists last game. Maybe make that be more, as he's been your biggest playoff performer, not named Kevin Durant. And then let all the other guys cook, as when it comes to the Timberwolves, you still haven't found a way to stop Anthony Edwards. So if you can't stop, if you're not going to be able to stop him for the 4th game where you might get swept, then maybe the best option is not to try to stop Anthony Edwards and to try to stop the team around him. As we know, Karl Anthony Towns cooked, Rudy Gobert cooked, and everyone in the Timberwolves played pretty well. So yeah. And now the Suns are down 3-0, the Pacers are up 2-1, and the Mavericks are up 2-1 as well. So the series are shaping up to be interesting.